wanna see good news. You don't see on regular TV. From another perspective, something relative to your needs. And we gonna have deep subjects, and we gonna turn the lens. And there's no topic we won't skip. So please don't miss weekly. Tune in to weekly to check in. Weekly check in. Weekly check in. Weekly check in. Tune in to weekly. Tune in. Check in. Weekly check in.
I don't know what the world is going to look like on the other end, but I think it's important that we have these conversations so we can push the imagination and be a part of it. You know,
and
so.
To be honest with you, to me, and this is what's going to get to this thing with Keisha down in Atlanta, is the fact of what I believe in is conscious capitalism. And what we have allowed for is unconscious capitalism. And anytime it then becomes unconscious, then you have a huge problem. Now, I understand that people who say that there's no way that capitalism can be conscious. And I disagree with that simply because of the gains that African Americans have made, right?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. So those of you who have tuned in, we just dove right into the issues, which I love about Dr. Sherice Janaye Neslon is that when you plug into her, you got to be on point. So welcome to another edition of the Weekly Check-In. I am Kaya Simmons with Arc Republic, and this week we are speaking with our guest contributor, Dr. Sherice Janaye Neslon, who is going to talk about issues that matter to Arc Republic, whether they're in the mainstream or not in the mainstream. So we actually just kind of got into this conversation about reimagining, and I've been saying this, like, you know, when the pandemic happened, there was a lot of people were a lot scared. You know, there was a lot of, like, because of the uncertainty. And I said, this is a great time, and this is a very opportune time for us to reimagine and not just in our head, but reimagine and construct who we are, what we look like, and what we're going to be on the other side, or somebody else will do it for us. So, you know, so what has happened is that a lot of people's realities have bottomed out. But because we have been living in this, I think Black folk have been living in this, like, you know, state of duress in a lot of ways, or things bottoming out and having to recreate it or bounce back, is that even though there's uncertainty, we're still navigating, which comes to the weekly check-in. Well, first of all, how you doing? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It to me, that what you just said is a segue, right? The idea that African Americans are the richest people in the world shows us that it can work. The problem is that it's predatory because it's not intended to work for us.
Right. So because you know what, I had this whole debate about conscious capitalism years ago, and I said, when you have a system that was founded and fueled off of free Black forced labor, what is it that as Black people, you know what I'm saying, we're going to get off of it, because theoretically we're not supposed to.
Correct. But theoretically, so you're right. Theoretically, we're not. However, in practicum, we have, right?
No. Well, we have if we weren't.
And they've blown
bothered.
it up. No,
Exactly,
right. And they've blown it
saying.
up, right? And no. And I guess my position on it is, we are coming to number at this point. I think there was a piece out in the Atlantic. We are coming to number and level of consciousness amongst white folks, who will then protect, in my opinion, in some ways, what we build this time around, because it will then be to their detriment not to. See, they've torn things down. They've torn things down previously because they had no way of benefiting. Mm-hmm. Now they have a value, right? They have a value added as well. They have something to lose if they tear it down this time, which is why, in my opinion, we will see fringe radical, we'll see what I like to call, or what has been called by scholars, the last gasp of white power. And that to me is what we're seeing in the moment, because the rest of Americans are now having to face that they are the global minority, right? White folks are the global minority. They are not the global majority, and they have only positioned themselves as such because of capitalism. And now that we've become of number, we've become of education, we've become a number of things, then we now have the ability to push back on that, right? Which is why 19 Black families went and bought 100 acres in Georgia and is now having a conversation with 2 Black banks that merged in Atlanta, right, to then develop that land. All stuff that white folks are going to have a hard time dismantling, especially while JP Morgan Chase said they're taking $30 billion to try to erase try to then at least to erase or to then close the gap of the racial divide as far as income is concerned, and then wealth. And so what I'm saying to you is we're seeing a world shift right now. So we're seeing a world shift and a world shift that agrees that capitalism is the way forward from a global perspective, i.e. China opening their markets, i.e. North Korea being in plunder because their markets are closed, i.e. Russia's behavior as to why they have infiltrated the highest level of government inside the United States, because they understand that they've been cut off then from the global economy. Because the economy is not based upon a finite resource anymore with gold, it's only based and backed on confidence, and that is how we created the entire system. We're looking for a world collapse if we're really looking for realignment. If you want realignment, that means there's a world collapse. And I don't know how many Black folks are really willing to give up their Starbucks, Mercedes, and their iPhone for that realignment to happen.
Oh, there's going to be a lot, because they're going to have to. So I see this. So I want to add to that. Those are excellent points. I want to add. So you're correct. I would say the white capitalistic structure as we know it now, and those who quote unquote believed in it, have everything to lose, right? Have everything to lose. I would say the collective that we call Black people have nothing to lose, because we've been ripped of all types of things. So when I have everything to lose against people like, shit, you just took everything away from me, I don't have anything to lose. At this point, there becomes this anxiety up against, like you aptly put, this global, America is not the global power, period. It is not the global power. And so it has subsisted so long on this gross exploitation of Black people specifically, which it built its labor on, its empire on. And people are not falling for the okie doke. So there has got to be a reshift, because if it doesn't reshift, it will totally collapse. But I would say this: if you have 60% of Black businesses that have shuttered permanently, you have about 37 million jobs lost in 2 months as a result of the pandemic. A lot of those people are Black people. Before the pandemic, the homeless population in Los Angeles was 30% of Black men. So I would say that a lot of Black people are underneath in terms of the, poverty line in the pandemic. So and I think that we inflate Black people who have, or think they have, some sort of kind of economic maybe buffering. Because I don't know about you. So I used to be in entertainment, right? Entertainment news. All of these entertainers that have postured all these years about having some level of security are on OnlyFans, are doing kind of like these bogus commercials, meaning the check that we talked about earlier of being a check or two away, from being in very dire straits, is a lot more closer and quicker for Black people. So the pivot, that family that you were talking about, the pivot we've had to have made, we needed to make the pivot faster than America. And that's just basically in the culture. It's like, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know, and then on top of this, the American economy has not existed on gold in a very long time. It's just fiat money. So what we're
But the rest of the world is fiat money, right? The rest of the world is fiat money because it's based upon that US dollar, right? There's very few currencies that are not then tied to the US dollar. And so I guess my point to you is that, and we're recording, so I'll make sure that I'm PG-13, is that.
I mean, honey, I said, honey, sis, girl, you know, I drop every type of bomb and F-bomb and S-bomb.
Right. But I guess my point is this, and I'll just say it how my dad used to say it all the time. White folks are they will burn it up before they let us completely run it and take over. And so my position is that Black folks do not have the same motivations and derelictions that white people do. And our evidence of that is South Africa. Because once Black people got in power in South Africa, we did not see a total realignment, a move to communism, a move to socialism. We didn't see any of those things. And so my argument is that, yes, capitalism has elements of evil. Yes, it was built off Black people's backs. But now that we are starting to gain in that system, you want to change the system. And I'm not going for you changing the system all of a sudden when I now get a chance to really play.
Well, I would say
that's how
that,
I see it.
yeah. So in South Africa actually, for me, and what I understand about it is, there's a huge fight over resources in South Africa, because the deal that was brokered in order to dismantle apartheid was to white South Africans: you could keep the banks, you could keep your land, we'll take the power. But what was understood, and I think this is what Malema is saying in South Africa, is that symbolic power. If white people still have control of the banks, they still have control of the mines, the diamond mine, the gold mines, the agricultural business, then majority of the Black people in South Africa are still living in poverty. And this is what, in my opinion, what Winnie Mandela was trying to push, was to try to have, have this more distribution of the resources on a national level. So I would say Black people have had, in my opinion, they've had like these moments, I would call them high activity moments, where they were enfranchising themselves. So we know right after the Civil War, that 20 some odd years, there was a rapid growth in the Black community. I would say when affirmative action was put in place, there was a rapid growth of enfranchisement. I would even say in the Depression, even though it hit Black people, there was a rapid growth of enfranchisement, simply because we knew how to maneuver when you didn't have shit.
Bigger than that, right? I'm in Fort Washington, Maryland. People do not realize how old the Black money is here, and it's because of the time during the Great Depression where these wealthy white landowners could not hold on to the land, and Black people swooped in and were able to, because like you said, they had been discriminated in banking and they weren't able to hold accounts. And so they had money under mattresses, and they would just go down to the county clerk's office and seize the land, or take up the land, or pay the back taxes, or whatever the situation was, right? That then insulated them, and which is why they dealt with the KKK and everybody else who was trying to come back and get the land once the economy has stabilized, right? And the counties weren't worried about it because they needed the money, so they gladly took the money to pay back taxes if it could come in cash, which oftentimes it did. And so, I mean,
we're talking about Fort Washington in Atlanta.
No, Fort Washington in Maryland.
In Maryland. Okay. Yeah.
Fort Washington, Maryland is like 70% or 80% Black or something like that.
Now, where is that in Maryland?
It's right outside of Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay. So is it by Hyattsville?
No, Hyattsville is on the opposite side. So it's on the Virginia side. So Fort Washington shares the Potomac River. The Potomac River runs in between, and Fort Washington is on one side, and then on the other side is Mount Vernon, if you think about it that way. Got you. But again, to further this point, right? And I'm not saying that capitalism doesn't need to be tweaked. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we've seen it work. The problem is that they, in my opinion, is that they've locked us in, from Black folks in particular, that they've locked us into a social hierarchy that's really theirs. That's a societal hierarchy that's theirs and not ours. We've bought into that, and that is why our capitalism is not working the way that it should is because we bought into their social system, right? This is why I push back against Marxists all the time. And Marxism, or the idea of a Marxist, there has to be a true bourgeoisie class. Black folks don't really have a true bourgeoisie class. And if we do have one, we've only gotten one really in the last 5 or 6 years. And if you name them, they're entertainers. They're not, I mean, Robert Smith, now we know he's a billionaire and he's come out and said it, right? But before, we didn't even know about Robert Smith. Mm-hmm. For the most part, all of the bourgeoisie class that we would have as far as Black people are concerned are with entertainers. And as you just explained, that check could go just as fast as it came. So
right.
Again, that's my pushback on, we are not at a developed enough stage in a diasporic sense to then even have a social, a social struggle with one another. We're not in that position. We are not in the position. We're not mature enough to say that my interests are different because I'm a professor and I'm Black versus the interest of the Black man who lives in the neighborhood with the check cashing place, who can't get a bank account, who's cashing his checks there. There's not that much difference between us, but we believe there is because we bought into it.
What up, Arc Republic family? If you like the weekly check-in and other podcasts like The Remedy, just press subscribe, and every time we are up, you will get a notification.
That what you just said is a segue into this idea of what's happening in Michigan, right? With this governor who supposedly, to me, it's a perfect segue. And it's a perfect segue because white folks oftentimes think that their actions don't have natural reactions. Mm-hmm. And he's been clowning up there for a minute.
Oh, yes.
And I mean, he been up there clowning. I mean, if we just want to keep it 100, as we would say in our community, yeah, he been up there clowning. You get what I'm saying? And so this is not generations before. I hate the saying that we're not our ancestors, because we are. Like, I don't like that saying. Totally. But what I will say, though, is we are not in the same social political context as our ancestors. So we get to do things that they didn't get to do. Because when we go to do them, we don't necessarily have to think about immediate death where they did. And so this clowning that this boy doing up there, and I'm not saying that the people who have organized this are Black, but I am saying to you that this level of anxiety is rife. It is real. It is palpable. And this idea that you can say things without a reaction, or that there are not consequences for the things that you have said, spewed, and done for a number of years, the chickens always come home to roost.
Right. So let me give you kind of like this information. So on Thursday morning, I got all my notes. I got ready for my girl. I was ready. So on Thursday morning, 13 white men from the ages of 20 to 42 were arrested for conspiracy to kidnap and kill the Michigan governor, who's a white woman, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. 6 face federal crimes involving the plot to kidnap Governor Wilmore at her vacation home, which is in the Western District of Michigan, before the November elections. 7 others were arrested under the Michigan Anti-Terrorism Act in their plans to, check this out, here are a couple of the charges. 1, they were identifying the home addresses of law enforcement officers to cause harm to them. 2, and also local officials. 2, instigate a civil war. Mm-hmm. 3, attack the Capitol building. These are 3 of some other, a long list of charges that they have. And as well, most, but not all of these people who have been detained have been connected to a white, I would call them domestic terrorist group. The mainstream media is using this militia, but this is a domestic terrorist group called the Wolverine Watchmen. So this is a really great kind of understanding of this is what happens when society breaks down. Now, when in May and late April, when they were having all those protests in the Capitol building, and you remember that African-American woman, Representative Sarah, I forgot her last name, but she was an African-American woman. She was like, look, where's the security? Like, where is the United States government to have security? This is crazy, right? But because, in my opinion, these were white people, mm-hmm. there wasn't that visceral reaction, right? But now the chickens have come home to roost.
Right, and I mistakenly called her a him, and so let me make sure I clear that up.
Oh, that's okay.
But we'll just say the governor to remain respectful.
Yes.
The governor, and this is what people have to understand, and I talk about this a little bit in my book about the Congressional Black Caucus, very briefly, but to justify the creation of dual sovereignty in this nation, we at the state level have mimicked everything that the federal government does. What I mean by that, as far as dual sovereignty, is this, and everybody understands this very, very easily. It's not something that's high level. As soon as you cross into Tennessee from Alabama, you in a different jurisdiction with a different set of rules and a different person responsible for that area or that territory. Right. That's all that sovereignty is talking about. And what I'm saying to you is that we, because of slavery, we established a dual sovereign system that allowed states to do one thing and the federal government to do another. Right. And the reason that I'm pointing this out is that the governor of the state, of any state, is then the replication of the president at the federal level. And when the governor has lost control, or when the governor has been salacious in communications to then to garner a reaction, then what you then see is disorder and, in some cases, anarchy, right? And we are seeing a certain level of anarchy play out in the state. And the governor, just like the governor of that state mirrors the president of the United States, we see that the same way that Donald Trump has incited that level of violence or has been demure about his intentions to stoke a race war. We're seeing that at a micro level. Throughout these states, right? We see it in connection to we're talking about what do they call the Wolverines or the
Wolverine Watchmen.
The Wolverine Watchmen, right? We learned of the Proud Boys just a couple of weeks ago during the debate. Right, and we then became right they are being forwarded and pushed forward by a white mythological thought process of white supremacy, and we're seeing it at the president level, at the government level, and then there's going to be reactions then to that based upon this level of incitement.
And I think this is also a very kind of clear play out of the federal government not supporting democratic states and leaving them to fend for themselves. But what happened in this case, and these groups knowing that, right? Correct. This is how groups in I think that they thought that they could carry this plan out and not receive the level of law enforcement pressure or being arrested, because there was this idea that Trump supports or would not come to the aid of democratic gubernatorial jurisdictions.
Correct.
And so what the Governor Whitmer did say in her press conference was that actually Donald Trump, and because he said Proud Boys stand back, stand by, actually sanctioned them as opposed to rebuke them, and them thinking that actually was his kind of official crowning of, you can do whatever it is you want to do. And so it's not going to happen. It is just not going to happen.
Well, but that's because of this dual sovereign system, right? Going back to this, the salacious comments that have been said, right? And in my opinion, that the governor's office hasn't tamped down. And so what I mean by salacious comments, I don't mean that she's espousing these things. I'm saying that they've been espoused and she has not tamped them down. Right. That she has not, and so I want to be very clear on this, because I don't want people to misread what I'm saying, but I'm saying that she has said vile, racist things. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that she has not repudiated them. That's correct. pushed them back. And because she has not pushed them back, and because there's this dual sovereign system where one head of authority is saying one thing and another head of the authority is saying something else, then this is where you cause levels of confusion. And to your point, we have not seen white supremacist actors be called the terrorists or the domestic terrorists that they are. We have not seen it, and that has also provided a level of illusion that has made these men, Proud Boys, Wolverine men, whatever they want to call themselves, believe that they are in full authority and full right to execute whatever plan that they've contrived or they've conceived.
Well, this goes along with the whole idea of who has the ability or the right to carry out full citizenship, which has been a conversation for a long time. Certain people can carry out what they will mark under patriot, right? So for a long time, these type of things that these Wolverine watchmen have done in the history, in our history, has been labeled, oh, this is being patriotic, right? This is somebody who is expressing or flexing their full citizenship. But you know what I'm saying, NFAC or whatever these military groups are, can't do it because you don't have that white skin. But this is part of the reimagining that we're talking about in this shift that is taking place, whether people like it or not. You cannot sustain power. White supremacy cannot sustain the power that it has. You know, it has got to reorganize and rebuild itself. So let's move on.
Let's move on. But I want to drop this scholar right here because I think this is important for your audience. Niambi Carter wrote a book, American While Black. Mm-hmm. And it talks about this full access to citizenship, mm-hmm. and how Black people are really what she calls a conflicted nativist. Meaning that they truly believe many ways in the home state or the nation state of the United States, which is the United States is really not a nation state, but you get the picture, that they believe in it, but they're conflicted about what that means for them in their own lives because they haven't been able to actualize all of their citizenship. So I want to drop that there because I think that transitions into the debate between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. And the reason that I feel like that's the transition here is that she was putting on display what full Black citizenship looks like, or what minority citizenship looks like, and what it's also constrained by. Because if you think about the debate, and the reason what I'm saying what it looks like is constrained by is that, and many people may disagree with this, and I'm okay with that. She is just as much Black woman as she is Indian woman, right? Mm-hmm. She sits in both of those spaces and has sat in both of those spaces for a while. This is not a new. This is not a new emergence. It's not like she's just decided. She didn't wake up like this, right? She's been so very secure in being Black and Asian, being an Indian woman. And to me, that is what was displayed in that debate, is the idea that minorities are usurping power, and that they are finding a way to create space in a power vacuum that's going to force you to realign. Mm-hmm. And to me, even the way that she performed last or 2 nights ago, even the way that she performed, the way that she was forceful in telling Pence to not overtalk her without being overly demonstrative, to not then be called an angry Black woman, the way that she went and stuck to the facts. Right? There's many people that talk about how that she didn't directly answer questions. That's typical for politicians, right? To steer you back to their talking points. But there wasn't a time in that debate where her every move wasn't calculative or wasn't being calculated. And that's what I think full citizenship means for everyday Black folks, is that when you are participating, you're being calculative at every level, because you know that one wrong move could then revoke your citizenship in some ways forever by being incarcerated.
So I would say this. I love this conversation, first of all. And I don't have on pink and green because of AKA. I just love the colors, okay? I just look cool in the colors. Okay, but anyway, I would say that Black people, I would argue, and I have to take this from, what is Anthony's last name? Oh my goodness, but he's a law professor. He's gonna kill me. Law professor at NYU. His whole argument is, and he's not the only one that says Black people have never had full citizenship. And he like has this whole argument. So I would say Black people have never had full citizenship because the concept of citizenship has been it has changed. It is not it is not a static thing. And so when there is this, oh shit, they're getting close to citizenship, let's kind of change what the bar is. You know what I'm saying? So I would say that. I would say that honestly, in my opinion, instead of Kamala Harris representing these two identities and what it means to express full citizenship, she actually represents the clash of the two identities. Now, this is what I'm saying. I'm going to quote my new sage, Jaguar Rice. Let's keep it a bean. Let's keep it a bean. Is India has a serious issue with class and color. It is, colorism runs rampant. And so I know because I have people in my family who are East Indian and Black, like immigrant East Indian and African American, where that colorism and that caste system, comes. So I actually think she represents the clash and how all her life she's tried to balance what that is. Now, what we know is probably at home, she was more Indian, right? But in her public self, she probably presents more as Black, going to Howard and the things that she has done socially. I do agree how she has had to play this thing of not being too, because going into the debate, they were like, oh, Pence gonna get it. He about to go up against a Black woman. And so she had to really self-correct, that's the word I was using last time, and check herself and monitor herself as not to be that, so she won't play into this quote unquote stereotype of when Black women come into these spaces or these spaces of authority and they're perceived as this big gorilla monster that's smashing out every,body. You know what
Girl,
I'm saying?
she couldn't, all of the self-correction didn't change them eyes.
Oh,
and that part slipped. I mean, like I said to somebody on Facebook, are we still guessing if she's Black or not now? Like, I mean, Debbie Allen done gave you that look. Felicia Rashad done gave you that look. Your mama done gave you that look. Like, and her self-correction was doing it and then smiling, right? Immediately was the self-correction, right? It still couldn't stop. And so what I think that I think this is something that I think is very important that you spoke on, is that in her childhood and her upbringing, she was probably enculturated far more Indian than she was. However, she's over 50 years old. I mean, you only stay in your parents' house for 20 years.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So no, but I think this is important, right? And I think this is an important point because this is a point that I often make or argue a lot with people, is that she ain't really Black. What does she know about grits? Okay, but that was literally those were 18 years of her life. She's actually spent more of her life as an adult who's had to then reckon with Blackness, because she's been perceived as Black, whether she wanted to be perceived that way or not. That has been her reality, and she understood that in a way that I also believe that Barack did. So she leaned into it. She's like, well, I don't really know too much culturally about what this is, so let me then go get acculturated, right? So that it's not inauthentic. And to your point, I think there is a balancing of that, but I would argue to you that is the balancing act that citizens of this country are making all the time. That inside of Black families, when for instance, when you or I, right, reach to certain ranks, there's this perception of us that we're making a whole lot of money and that we're so well, right? For you, you're in Italy right now, right? The amount of Black people that we grew up with who went to Italy or lived in Italy, I mean, it's not even thought of. So I do think it's a representation of a clash, but I think that's the representation of a clash that's happening inside of Black and brown families inside of the United States as citizens all the time. I agree that we haven't reached full citizenship. I do think that we have gotten closer. I think that we were at the closest when we had the ability to vote. And the reason that's so, I think that's so important, and people do not understand this. It is what does my vote matter? And the reason that it's important, which I think transitions to another a thing that's on our agenda about the Supreme Court justice, if I don't remember correctly. I think
let's kind of. I love the flow. I feel like this is like a long ass hip hop song, and I'm feeling it. I'm totally feeling it. I wanted to, I'm glad you brought that up. For me, for me, and this is for me, and so I'm talking personally, and I also will talk from a scholarship perspective because my research is specifically in African diasporic identity and how people from the Caribbean, Africa, and African Americans kind of express and manifest and imagine their identity. Is that for me, it's never once that I doubt that Kamala is a Black woman. I think that that's a frivolous argument, to have. I think that the questions that we have got to, and this is in her navigating, because I just say anybody who does not ascribe to what is considered, looks like an American citizen, must always navigate that more so in more areas than other, is when you enter in these spaces, when you are the only one, right? How do you navigate these policies and this level of authority? And this is the biggest question in terms of Kamala Harris's record and this is for me. The thing I would appreciate if Kamala would just stand in her identity firmly. I don't think she necessarily stands in her identity firmly, but I think that is just, in my opinion, the narration of her life of, who am I, or who I have to be at this moment in time. But I think if she did, it will bring it will illuminate more of the things, because her record as an attorney general in California, from the perspective of a Black person whose parents are from the South, blah, 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 and has experienced multiple people in my family, both in Los Angeles and in the Bay Area, because half of my family's in the Bay Area, is not comparable to how Attorney General Harris has moved as Attorney General. But I would say that it's not necessarily because of her quote unquote Blackness, but more so of how she is attempting to kind of navigate and not be perceived as too militant and kind of get in where she fits in, which is it. Go ahead.
To me, again, this ties all back in to this Supreme Court justice and
Let's
to her.
Go.
This is to me, this is why. To me, this is why though. Okay, so voting is important, not just because it elects a president or elects a mayor or elects whatever else. It literally signifies that you are a citizen that's inside of the judicial process. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because who then prosecutes is elected. Who then sits in the jury box is based upon people who voted. Mm-hmm. Who then decides the judge is the judges are elected in most places. Right. So if you are not voting, or if you're not participating in the process, the very justice system that you're crying out against is then affected without you being in the system. And the reason, and I'm not saying that the system is perfect. I'm saying that that's why they're trying to keep you out of it, because they know if you vote and get in it, that you can change it, push it, and force it. And mm-hmm. that's exactly why they don't want you in it. And so the reason that I feel like that transitions A to Kamala and then B to the Supreme Court nominee is it translates to Kamala is because she understood that the way that I change this is by changing the policies. Mm-hmm. Is that if I strap on my Indian sari, or if I rock out, if I let my hair get, kinked up and rock a natural, mm-hmm. all of those things are going to be an abject opposition to how I'm trying to push and change this policy. And I know that policy is going to outlive me. Now, you don't have to take this view or support that's what she did. But while her identity may be fluid to some or may be fluid to many, her position on changing policy or structurally changing the system has not changed and has been extremely steadfast in her career.
I would have to disagree, sis. I would have to disagree on that. Is that while she has done things in terms of imposing the death penalty in California, her stance on reparations, and I would say this, as an attorney general, how she moved was, in my opinion, more problematic than how she moved as a senator, because I think once she became a senator, she felt like she was on that fast track of being considered for the presidential campaign. But there were a lot of things when she worked in California that showed she was not the progressive prosecutor that she positioned herself on.
I think it's a balance. And so, I think it's a balance.
But see, the balance, in my opinion, the balance did not sway towards the health and protection of Black and brown people in California.
It didn't sway at the but this is to my point. It didn't sway that way at the state level. But if you look back at her when she was a prosecutor in San Francisco, it did. Right.
So, but that even proves my point. So the thing is that hyper locally you okay, but once you have more positions of power.
No, it's not about more position of power. It's about a larger group that you're now representing, and the fact. And in politics, this is what it speaks to, right? And we talk about this all the time. And the idea that the population, the Black population in California is shrinking. It is not expanding. And so to me, once she got up to those places, there were compromises that she had that in many ways, and this is why I believe her to be an opportunist, which is, I think, my chief issue with her.
We agree on that.
No, and that, to me, that's the thing that rubs me, I think, wrong about her. But I had to check myself, because I would say, would that rub me wrong about a white man that's opportunist, right? And so to me, that's the thing, is that is she opportunistic? Absolutely. I definitely believe in that, which to me explains the balance once I get up to the state level. It's not about having more power. It's about the constituencies in which I then represent. Right? It's about who I'm representing, and we see this play out with Black legislators at different intersections. Right? If we look at Congressional Black Caucus members who are in what's called or considered to be a toss-up district, meaning that it could go either way, that they find themselves being more middle of the road, or even as sometimes conservative, to then hold on to the district. So I think a lot of that's politics at play and not necessarily identity, which again, though, transitions me to then the Supreme Court justice. Right?
But see, this is the thing. But here we are, though, and she's running for president, and the Black vote is important, which she does not have. So all of this politics that she's been playing has not worked in her favor. And let's be honest, is that if Joe Biden would not have brokered whatever crazy deal he had with Clyburn and South Carolina, Kamala Harris wouldn't even be maybe even considered, because she dropped out of the race in December. So the question is, this is in terms of like, we must retool our politics, because let's keep it a B. I love you, Jaguar Wright, for that. Let's keep it a B. Black voters have not been considered or have not been catered to in a very long time. And an opportunistic white, hold on for a minute, an opportunistic white politician would in some way attempt to placate to the Black voters in their constituency.
He has.
Hold on for a minute. What we're seeing in this one is that it has Joe Biden. Now it's not, we don't even have to go to the Black community, because the Black community know what's up. We know that the Black community will vote. That is, in my opinion, what this Biden-Harris ticket is feeding. There is no substantive Black agenda. That is why.
Oh, that's not true at all.
That's why that there are Black folk who are not signing on to this Biden-Harris ticket. Because
no. There's more substantive. There's more substantive policy for Black folks, I think, this time around than there's ever been. I mean, people are not reading it. We're not hearing about it, and people are not reading it. Let's first start. If we start back, right? Let's journey back for a minute to say that Hillary Clinton was in 2016 was the very first person to then put out literally a plan for historically Black colleges and universities and put $20 billion toward that. The very first presidential candidate to do that, right? Why do I highlight that, and why is that important? Because literally that's the backbone then of Black upper class, middle class, whatever you want to call it. They coming from there. Most of us are coming from those institutions. So if you do not shore them up, then the progression that we see in Black spaces would be almost nil. If you look at Congressional Black Caucus members as far as inside of the legislature, if you look across the landscape of Black mayors, a great number of them attended HBCUs. There's another, as far as Black judges serving right now, 25% of all Black judges in the country right now that we have an account for have attended an HBCU, either for graduate school or for law school. So what I'm saying to you is we have seen substantive policy. It actually started in 2016. It then grew under Joe. Joe made it larger, more expansive. He's talked about opportunity zones. There's a lot of policy that's out there about what he's going to specifically do.
Opportunity zones do not not bring money to Black communities, which what we have seen in the Trump administration, who has had an opportunity
and that
zone
is that
frenzy.
again key. No, because when Marion Barry did it in Washington D.C., it worked out very well for Black
Marion Barry in Washington D.C. is one case study.
No, but it worked. It
Where?
worked well. It's worked. No, it's worked well in Atlanta. It's worked well in other places.
That's why Atlanta is facing gentrification. Oh my gosh, it has not worked well in gentrification.
It has well.
We have a plethora of information that talks about these live, work, play zones in Atlanta that have displaced millions of Black people in Atlanta.
Yes, but that's all new.
Out of historically Black areas.
Right, but that's new.
That's been going on since the 80s. That's going on since the 80s.
But not at the rate that it's going on now. Like Midtown or Mid City or what they call it Midtown. They call it Midtown in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Midtown in Atlanta. Because I went to school at Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and was in Atlanta a lot. When I was in school down there in 08, 09, Midtown was still mostly Black. I mean, primarily Black. It is now shifted where it's not the case. And so, but again, that's based upon having policies that then make sure that you keep the population where they are. And we have seen it work well. It's been happening in the 80s. It's going to happen. It's an effect of capitalism. So you have to write into the policy to make sure that natural effect doesn't happen.
So this is what's happening in Atlanta, because I was in Atlanta. I went to Clark Atlanta University. I was in Atlanta from 2004 to 2007. So this marks the period where you have Black Atlantans being pushed out of the 280, right? The freeway that goes around, the 285, excuse me, that goes around Atlanta, being pushed out to the outside, and then white people moving in. I lived in Midtown. Now, maybe the part that I lived in Midtown wasn't representative of Midtown, but there weren't a lot of Black people. Midtown at that time was considered the place for gay white men to be. But there was this serious, and I remember this I remember this, but see, I don't know all of Midtown. Like, I don't know what the district is with Midtown. So that's why
where the line starts and where it ends.
Yeah, so I really can't speak. I really can't speak of what Midtown consists of. But what I do know is that a lot of them, cafeteria workers that worked not far from Clark Atlanta, which is not far from Midtown, we're talking about how these tax prices were going up and they were losing their housing and had to move into apartments because they couldn't afford it. Now, all of those places that they were talking about now become part of the Atlanta Beltline, or the Beltway, that is like this green space that has like basically ran through all these Black communities or legacy Black communities that have being replaced. So opportunity zones, I think it's like a theory. Theoretically, they work. But who benefits on the other end is not Black people. So that's what I was.
Well, it depends how it's set up. And in the case of Atlanta, and I don't disagree that people are not being pushed out, but in the case of Atlanta, the reason that I bring it up is because what we don't take into consideration is that a lot of Black people are not clamoring to live in the city anymore anyway. That's something that we don't take into consideration, that a lot of Black folks are leaving the city for the suburbs. It's a difference between getting pushed out and then leaving, right? There's a lot of Black people who do not, who have no interest in moving back inside of Atlanta city limits, right? And then there's a battle, right? There's a battle back and forth about that. And so what I'm saying to you is that I agree that opportunity zones are problematic, but any policy can be problematic if you're not thinking then about the least of these and who's going to be most affected. And I think that is the key, right? We have not celebrated what it then means to think about the least of these, which is why opportunity zones then become a white wealth trap, because we're not thinking about the least of these. We are thinking about who can get the most profit at what point in time. And and going back to the DC example is because Marion Barry was very specific about percentages. We don't get specific in these things about percentages. We don't get specific about, if you want this opportunity zone or if you want to build here, you need to show me where 40% of your workforce is then being employed by Black folks. And not only that, then I also need to see the breakdown of costs for those people. So not only is it 40% of the contracting out, it's also then how much money they're making or what size are those contracts in comparison to the other white folks that are getting these contracts. It's all of those things. And you have to be very keenly aware and historically present to understand what has been done in the past so it doesn't happen to you again. And so, again, I don't say that they're not problematic. I am saying to you that if done correctly, they can work, but they can only work when we're thinking, though, of then the least of these and then how they are done. And another example, I think, of this where it's been done well, or a very smaller example in DC, for instance, it's the gentrification that's happening all around Howard, right, where I lived around in that area. I didn't want to live around Howard, so I purposely went to the suburbs. But there was a apartment building that Howard owned there, and it's been dilapidated. Folks need to move out, and they were able to then charge people, mostly Black people, cheap rent because the place wasn't up to standard, but Black folks were okay with it because it was the cheapest thing in the city, cheapest thing close to Howard, didn't require them to move, etc. Well, when the building got condemned and needed to be updated, the people didn't want to leave. So what did Howard do? They said, you know what? You've been living like this for a while. Most of it's our responsibility because we let this building basically disintegrate to this point. We're not only going to move you, we're going to pay for you to move, all of that. And then what we're also going to do is for the 20, 30, 40 of you that have been living here, you will then move back into this once it's renovated. And then you will live here, well, I think 6 months, a year, free of charge, or at the exact same rent rate that you were paying before you moved out of here. Right?
But so after that, what will it be? It would be at market rate after 6 months?
No. So then they worked in a deal with the city to then subsidize. They worked with Bowser to then subsidize the rent from that point on. But most of them were elderly, and to be honest with you, they'll probably be dead in 10 years anyway.
Which they factored in the.
I mean, just to be quite honest, I want to be very transparent here, right? They're older, so in 10 or 15 years, I mean, we're not looking at that much loss of money, right? By making the city then pair you up with 20 or 40 people. But I'm saying to you is that if we make those types of conscious decisions and say, I'll make a little less to then do right by people, it can work. We are just so damn greedy that we want to, get the, what my grandma used to say, we want to get a blood out of a turnip. Right? We do. And to me, that is the problem, is that we do not in any way want to take less of a profit. There was a corporation I saw, and I can't name its name, and I probably shouldn't give it as a reference because I can't name its name. But on Twitter, the CEO came on and said, we made a decision during the pandemic not to fire not one person. What we decided to do is take a little less money, or take some money off of our margins at the top. And then we also decided to then pay everybody more. What we then saw was more profit come in the door, because now people were not only secure that they were going to have a job, but they had more money than to spend, right? And so what we then saw was an increase in profits. And what we felt was then fiscally responsible was for us to then share in those profits with the people that helped us to get there, right? And so it can happen. It can be done. The problem is that all of us are too greedy for it to get done.
So I need to respond. I'm going to respond to several of the points that you made. So the first one I want to talk about is moving to the suburbs. This might be an unpopular opinion, but at this point, I don't give a flying. You know what I was going to say on that one. Black people move to the suburbs to follow white people. I'm just going to be straight up. You don't have to agree with me. I don't care. And because they're moving to the suburbs to follow white people, because that's where the resources are. In one way, it's cultural in terms of the white man's ice is colder. But what happened is that in the 70s, from the 50s to the 70s, when white flight happened in the Americas and white people left the Americas, moved to the suburbs, and all of these highways that basically ran right through the cities, and all of the money and the resources were taken out of the urban areas and put into the suburbs. Of course, you want to be in an area where you have more connection to resources, right? So of course there's a justification in order to move to the suburbs. What Black people did not know was that when they would move to the suburbs, they would lose all political, social, and cultural capital that they had in the urban areas or where they were in concentrated populations, right? Which is the problematic. And then I would say this, as living in New York for 12 years, I can tell you how many of those grandchildren of those who fled to the suburbs are moving back to the cities because they found out simply the amenities are better, the structure are better, they're closer. So because what happened is that people might have left the suburbs, but their jobs and the cash cow still remained in the urban areas, right? So a lot of white people start moving back into the cities, which we see in Atlanta and all these other areas, which goes to my next point, gentrification. And so in terms of, I'm not 100% familiar with gentrification in DC, but there are a lot of, in my opinion, patterns that go on. What residents who have been living in these, I hate this term, inner city or urban areas, because I grew up in the inner city, right? That's what you had to say on your application to get, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about.
The coded language, right? The coded language that says I'm black.
I was in the inner city. Okay, anyway. So in these areas have all said this. Prior to gentrification, we begged these cities and these, or the municipality in which we live, to pour more resources into simple things like better parks, update the parks, lighting, you know, the streets, all of these things that people in the suburbs enjoy, right? So let's be honest. When white people left the suburbs and they took all the resources, there was an intentional apocalypse. I'm from South Central Los Angeles. The neighborhood that I was raised in was actually where Japanese people lived before the internment camps, and they had to go into the internment camps. And so what happened, it was a very nice and lovely neighborhood. But when black people started moving in, somehow miraculously, crack was dropped in our neighborhood. The sheriffs and the LAPD ran rampant in our neighborhoods. This is intentional degradation of black communities. So I think that must be acknowledged, and we're talking about what happens.
That's true, but we've seen a shift from that. It's not the classic case anymore, and I don't disagree. You're absolutely right, but it's shifted so much now.
Let me specifically talk about DC, because I did do some research in terms of what happens in DC, and talk about it, and listening to like the DC Native and the DC Native movement that has happened, and specifically to Marion Barry, Maynard Washington. And what's the brother in Atlanta, the mayor in Atlanta? I forgot him. Who's the mayor in Atlanta?
Kwame Brown?
No. I'm talking about the mayor in the 80s. The mayor in Atlanta. The mayor in Atlanta, his name escapes me. And even to a degree, the mayor in Newark, who at the time was Kenneth Washington. So I'm talking about these mayors who became mayors like roughly around the 70s and 80s, had a black agenda in order to empower. Right. So there was actually this huge meeting that happened in terms of how can we, now we're moving in this political power, how can we now become this strong political bloc that we can enjoy this economic, cultural, social, political enfranchisement? It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Why? Because the white power structure was like, hell no. If we have a whole bunch of Marion Barrys walking around who comes out of the civil rights era, Maynard, what's his name? Maynard Jackson. That's it. Maynard Jackson is in Atlanta, and Harold Washington is Chicago. That's what it is.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're talking about Maynard. You're talking about Maynard Jackson.
Maynard Jackson in Atlanta,
who came right after Andrew Young.
Yes, ma'am. So if we have all of these politically conscious people getting into these political powers, siphoning resources to real black programs, we can't have this, because we can't get the cities back. Because let me tell you, white people left the cities, but they didn't leave the cities for good. In Newark, this is part of my research. In Newark, white people left after the riots. They fled. It was white fight was already going on, but in 1967, when the riots happened, they said literally within 4 days, white people left the city. But the intention was, because they still own property, was we're going to come back. We don't know when we're going to come back, but we're going to come back and we're going to take this over because we built this. This is this ownership that you were talking about and that your daddy was talking about like the white man will destroy everything before they give it up. So a Maynard Jackson, right? I mean, Maynard Jackson's legacy gets destroyed by his addiction to crack. Ironically, right? People who are on heroin is called a health issue and a health crisis. But I'm going to even take it forward. Call me Petty Betty if you want to, girl. I don't care. Hunter Biden is a crackhead. And his father is running for, roll your eyes, smack your teeth, and ride out. Right? Hunter Biden is addicted to crack. Hunter Biden has a baby by his dead brother, right? So this unsavory past can be considered as somebody who's going through something, he's working through his issues and whatever. But at the time, Maynard Jackson totally, you know what I'm saying? His whole legacy gets dismantled from his crack addiction. So it's really
Barry's did. To some degree, Marion Barry's did too. I guess my point is this.
Well, let me just talk about opportunity zones. Opportunity zones and them being successful, in my opinion, are two things: access to power and access to resources. We don't have that. And so as a result of that, we don't have in Atlanta. So what's considered the highest concentration of wealth? PG County, Atlanta. Where are we talking about? Where is considered the highest concentration of wealth? I can clearly point to you how there is lack of power and lack of resources. I'm talking about real resources.
Right, but you're talking about, but you're saying lack of resources. Are you saying lack of resources in comparison to white folks? Or are you saying lack of resources? Because there's a difference between lack of resources and lack of resources in comparison to white people. Because we are not. If we only have $8 of wealth and compared to $100,000 of wealth that white people have, no amount of access to power is ever going to get us in 4 years, it's going to take a while for us to then close the gap of access to wealth resources. It's not going to happen with 2-3 people as mayor.
Right. So what historically has happened is that when Black people got the money or they got their land up, I don't know about you, but like in multiple family histories, not only just my own, when Black people had land, they didn't have the power. White people came and literally neutralized, burnt them out, killed them, and ran them off the land because they didn't have power. So even if you have resources and you don't have access to power, then that means you're vulnerable to being removed or displaced, right?
But so that's to me why white people are scared. To me, that's why white people in this moment are extremely scared, is because they're realizing that we are acquiring both at record speed, and there's nothing that they can do about it, which is why I pack a court or pack courts at the federal level, so that then whatever you decide to do at the state level, because I've already understood from a map perspective that I've lost. And I knew that I lost in 2010 when I had to draw the map in such an auspicious way to then make it so that I could then regain some level of power. I knew then I had lost in 2010. So I am just walking on this verge of what can I do structurally to change things, because I know that I'm losing. So what it is if we go back to this dual sovereignty piece, is even if you gain this power at the state level, which Black folks are doing, if we look at Black women mayors across the country, they performing like gangbusters. They're dealing with levels of institutional racism, a systematic racism. They're doing unprecedented things. If you look at Lori Lightfoot, no one expected her to then fire that black police chief up there before letting him resign. So Black women are from a local sense, and Black men that are mayors from a local sense, right? The mayor down in Birmingham, Alabama, making huge changes, getting them to push back on charges they were trying to file against Black people who pushed down the statue. All these things. That's why white folks are scared, is because they're starting to see a level of parity that's being created, and that is why they're scared. And that's why I pack a court and I use a judicial system that is grossly unfair to you to then push you out. So it doesn't matter what power and resources you've acclaimed inside of the righteous system of at the state or the local level, because at the federal level, I'm going to then preside over cases that are going to push it, that are going to push everything that you've established to naught, because they know that's exactly what's happening. And that goes to why you want to Amy Barrett on the court. You want to Amy Barrett on the court who's then going to read the Constitution in a particular way, so that then it then solidifies the level of white privilege that we have seen. So I don't disagree with the history that you're teaching. I'm saying to you that we are at a shift and a breaking point, and white folks know it, so they're trying to move the structure so that because this is the thing, is that they know that once we get to a certain level of power, there is no beating us back. And to go even further, we don't even want the same power that they have. So
exactly.
to make it a dual,
my point.
Right?
Go ahead,
to make it a dual. Not only will they gain power at local level and state level, not only that, they will then also parse out that power in a way that we'll never parse that power out, because we control. We are about power and control. Black people want power, but they're not also always keen on this level of control, of getting people to do things just because you have a position. And so to me, that's why it didn't work. It didn't work just because it didn't work just because white folks came in and busted the party up. It didn't work because when Black people get in charge, they're not trying to take control. And some people feel like that's our detriment, is that we do not try to take control. Instead, we set up little penny ante gatekeepers or doorkeepers that aren't doing anything because they come and blow up the structure. So while you watching the door, the whole building's gone, right? And so I think this is what's at play, and I think this is and I encourage you to watch a Black political strategy we're doing with Black Leadership Roundtable at the end of the month, right before the election, because I think this is the crux of the crux of it for Black folks. Period. Is what is our strategy moving forward? Are we going to stay inside the system and push the system? Are we going to try to dismantle it completely? Are we willing to leave? Like, what are we really willing to do? And I would say at the breaking point, right? We're at a breaking point. This is the breaking point. What are we really prepared to do? Not even going to do. What are we prepared to do right now?
So I would say that, so, I mean, you made excellent points, and so just to add exactly what you're saying is that also continue to watch the Remedy and the Weekly Check-In to see how we grow, because what we are seeing, what I would say, what the establishment is seeing. So I think this is what's happening. So the establishment was phenotypically, or what it looked like, is this predominant white structure. Over the years, it has changed because you have all of these kind of gatekeepers. You got the House Negroes, you got the people from the Latino community and the Asian community who are gatekeepers of this white establishment in order to kind of, mix it up. This is a part of hegemony or hegemony, however you want to say it.
Hegemony.
Is to when power is challenged, is to assess what's going on and change it up and switch it as if you actually really made change, but you didn't really make change. You kind of put on like these kind of filters or like this veil to seem as if it did. So what's going on is, in my opinion, not only just Black communities, but the world is like, we're tired of the lies. We're not going to do it anymore. And we are going to operate even outside of it as much as we possibly can, because Birmingham, Jackson, Mississippi, these places where you're talking about, even in Camden, New Jersey, where these Black mayors have had to literally lead with absolutely no money, right? And what they found out is that the resource is the people. So what's going on is that what happens when the people are like, excuse all of my French, fuck the motherfucking money, excuse my language, forget the money. What do we need to do in order to put ourselves in some way that we can make sure that our families, our grandchildren, our children are living in a healthy state of being? This totally is changing the whole game, right? Because what we see with coronavirus, money doesn't stop coronavirus, right? You know what I'm saying? All these things, or, the ha-ha thing is that all of these people with money and resources, with these hired helps, these maids, these nurses, blah, 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 they're like, yo, I can't come because I am poor. I have coronavirus, or my something have coronavirus. I can't serve you anymore. So as Bob Marley says, when it rains, it doesn't rain on one man's house. But let's go to the Supreme Court, which I'm glad you brought that up. My question to you, guru of political science, because that's not what I am, is what does a conservative right-wing court look like? And how do we navigate that? Because we're talking about what, 20 maybe years, 25 years? I don't know.
No. How old is Amy Berry? I think she's
40. She's 40 something. Yeah, 40.
Yeah, she's in her late. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, however you feel about her, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in her 80s. So 20 years? No. Let's try 40.
Woo-hoo.
Okay.
Woo-hoo.
Okay. Let's try 40. And what does it mean? It means if you as a Black person are questioning if you have citizenship now, you can kiss it goodbye. And you could kiss it goodbye because the Civil Rights Act of 1965, and people do not understand how visceral. let me explain it to you this way. Shelby v. Holder, Shelby County v. Holder, Eric Holder, to basically gut Section 4 and Section 5, allowed us to be in the predicament we are in today, with Texas and Harris inside of Harris County having one drop-off spot for the entire county, which would have not been possible had the Civil Rights Act of 1965 been intact.
Right.
Okay. We are talking about a judge who not only supported that ruling, but also worked for a justice who believed that Black people did not belong inside of the academy. Now, I take that personally because I'm a professor inside of that system. But she clerked for Antonia Scalia, who believed that Black people did not belong in university.
Oh, yes.
She has, to make matters worse, she has dubbed herself Supreme White Savior by then adopting 2 Haitian children. Okay? We are talking about a woman who then said that Justice Roberts, who's the Chief Justice on the court as of now, was stupid for siding then with the more liberal faction of that Supreme Court when he then allowed for Obamacare. Now, I know the name for it is the Patient and Protection Act, the Patient and Affordable Care Act, but I call it Obamacare. And I call it Obamacare because a Black man by the name of Charlie Rangel sponsored the bill. A Black man in the name of Barack Obama signed that bill. And a Black man by the name of Byron Allen. I'm saying this right. Tyson Allen.
Yeah, Byron Allen's the media mogul.
Yeah, no, not Byron Allen. Tyson Allen, I believe, is his name. What's that? Tyson is his first name. He was the former CEO of Kaiser before he passed away. I'm mixing up his name, but Tyson is his first name. And and those 3 Black men created a bill and got white folks so upset that it went to the Supreme Court for them to gut it. And then this white woman came back and said that it was stupid for Roberts to then make this decision. So when we talk about the implications, let's just look at the body of the work of the person that we're talking about. Let's talk about the fact that she hasn't even been that I have underwear older than how long she stayed on the court in the federal process. That she's just been appointed as a federal judge.
Right. Yeah. Not even 3 years. Not even 3 years as a federal judge.
Not even 3 years.
These are issues. Right.
It's unprecedented. And who appointed her to the federal? Who appointed her to the federal circuit? I think it's Circuit 7 up there in Indiana.
Trump did.
Yes, up there, and I think it's the 7th Circuit. If I'm correct, 7th Circuit. It's in Indiana. He did. So and I'm not saying that everybody he's appointed is problematic. No, I am saying that everybody he appoints is problematic because we know that out of the 189 judges that he's appointed, that not one of them have been Black. Not even a token, not even a step and fetch it Negro. And there hasn't even been one, right? So when we're talking about implications, the implications are beyond for us to even fathom. They're beyond for us to even fathom about what then it means. I'll give you another example. Inside of California right now, because I'm still voting as a California voter, Proposition 16 seeks to then undo Proposition 209, which then essentially cut affirmative action in the state of California.
Okay.
Proposition 16 would then undo that amendment to the Constitution and basically then allow.
Explain what Proposition 16 is, because we have people not from California who know.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad you're bringing up policy.
Oh, absolutely. No, Proposition 16, and I wrote about this from on the Scholars Network. So if you want to look at it a little further, I've talked about it there. Proposition 16 essentially just does this. It then allows for affirmative action. It allows then for not necessarily quotas, but it does allow for preferential treatment based upon your race or your race, your sex, your ethnicity, et cetera, all of the demarcation factors that have been named in discrimination suits. 209, Proposition 209 is what ended that preferential treatment. And so it's really undoing Proposition 209, which was back in the 90s that when they ended affirmative action in the 90s. And so 209 is the vote for that. So Proposition 16 is basically bringing affirmative action back to the state of California. Why do I bring this up? This is why I bring this up. Because California, it's on the ballot. It's a ballot initiative, which means that the people of the state of California can vote for it, vote yes on it, and then make it then to then amend the Constitution in the state of California. However, if someone decides to sue in the state of California based upon Proposition 16, and it finds its way to the Supreme Court, which I believe that it will, then it's done. It is done. Because we already know how Amy feels about that based upon a man that she clerked for. We don't need to look at any of her rulings. We can look at who she's affiliated with. Because like my mama used to say, if it walk like a duck, and if it walk like a duck, swim like a duck, then it's a duck. And if it's not a duck, then it's okay with acting like a duck. So either way we go, and I use that as a piece of policy to show you that there's right now implications for her then being on that court, which is why if we go back to then Kamala and this, the debate, which is why I felt no kind of way about her not answering the question about would they expand the court. And let me be very clear about that for your viewers who don't understand that.
Before we get into that, hold on. I need to respond or kind of with what you said. That was a good piece in a chunk. So studies have already shown that the ideologies of judges provide a strong influence, as you said, about how they will vote on policies and legislation. A lot of what I've been hearing in the airways in terms of why you should vote is that Trump is definitely putting in these conservative judges. Now, for a Black person, this is not anything new, right? So here is Kaya embedding this historical narrative. You know, for the most part of the United States, existence, it has been, at the very least, a U.S. Supreme Court that has not necessarily kept or been even interested in the well-being of Black folks. And I'm a Black person, right? So I'm talking as, from this perspective. So this narrative in terms of, oh my goodness, Trump is putting in all these people and our, lives are going to be bad for 25 and 40 years. What are some things that we can say or we can do if this happens? Because we got to navigate it, right? So how do we move out of this, oh my God, but how do we strap up and get ready for it if it happens?
So to me, this is why it's important to vote and make sure that however you feel about Biden or Harris, they get in, because I believe they will pack the court. I believe that they are going to shift the dynamic in the court. And this is why this is a natural progression. And I'm glad you stopped me, because oftentimes I'm a professor, I get on the roll. So I appreciate that.
I'm a professor too, girl.
Yeah. We get on our rolls.
Bring it back.
Right. So with that being said, I think that people have to understand that in the reason of this whole thing, they're calling it packing the court, and it's not really packing the court. That's a negative derogatory term that they're using. What they're actually doing right now is packing the court. They're packing the judicial appellate courts. So to break this down for people, you have your judge that you would see based upon a state crime. If you committed a crime in the state of California, then you have that judge, and then they usually have an appeals, and then they have a Supreme Court inside of your state. The same thing is mirrored on the federal side, is that you have a federal judge that would then, when Black folks said you did time, you doing Fed time, it means that you came before a federal judge. Then there's the appellate court, which then is judges that are in a particular district, and there's 3 of them that sit on then an appellate decision, and the appellate decision is about procedure. Was there a procedure? If they go to appeal, they have to appeal based upon procedure, and then it goes into the Supreme Court. Now, let me be very clear. Cases that are at the state level usually have to maturate through the process, meaning that to start at the local level, they then go to the appellate system inside the state, and then they go to the Supreme Court at the state level, and then end up going to the Supreme Court. The only time a case then immediately goes to the Supreme Court if it's between 2 states. So if 2 states are arguing, then it immediately then goes to then the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court has to decide they're going to hear the case, which is something else which is a big misnomer. And this is why, again, I said that I think it was important and prudent for Kamala not to answer, and Joe Biden for that matter, not to answer the question about then expanding the court is what should be actually used. And the expansion would then add 3 judges to the court. No, not 3, because there's 9. So is that no? It add 2 to the court, because that gets you to 11, and it would add 2 to get you to 11. And we've seen this be suggested or tried before during FDR, when the Supreme Court, which, as you have mentioned, which is actually historically correct, has had the tendency to then be more conservative over time, right? We know that, right? We know that based upon Dred Scott. We know that based upon Plessy v. Ferguson, right? We know that in our historical history as Black folks, that has been more conservative. Right. However, what we also know is that FDR tried to expand that court to then allow then for these social programs, some of them that we still look forward to today: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, etc. So what we're looking at is, which is one of the biggest reasons that you should vote, is because if they expand this court and get 2 people on this court, then you can start beating back some of these judges at the appellate level. Can you remove those people at the appellate level? Yes, you can. You can actually impeach them, right? So what I'm saying to you is that the offensive has to be twofold. What do? We have to gird up in our communities. We have to be vigilant. For those of us that are trained with using weapons, go stock up, get you a stockpile. For those of you that are not trained using weapons, go get trained, or decide that's not how you're going to protect yourself. But that's one of the ways. The second way is to vote and then become active inside of at the local level, so that you can push against what's happening. And then the third thing is vote at the federal level, because you're going to see a change with judges. And the reason that we know we're going to see a change versus just hypothetical what they're going to do is because Barack Obama was the sole president to then appoint the most Black people in the federal judgeship than any other president in history, more than Bill Clinton. So we already know what is going to be done, and we also know then, and this is what I hope, is that if they expand the court, that Obama becomes a Supreme Court justice. Because that's where I think he'll actually do better work than
I think he would do better work as a Supreme Court justice than the president. So this is excellent points that you made. I would say this on top of it is that you can never determine how a president will move. No. I would say, you know what I mean? Because I would say this is that Black people have been more on the end of being disappointed in having deliverables by presidents than having deliverables by presidents. So, and I'm so glad. I am so glad that you said stock up, tribe up, and do what it is. And so this is I think this is something I've been talking about, and I've been saying is that voting, going to cast a ballot, is the most pedestrian thing that you could do. That's the easiest thing you could do. Put it in work and placing pressure on your elected officials is actually where the real citizenship or the political activity goes into. I think we think that when you vote somebody in office, they're just going to automatically just lay out this red carpet, but that's not how it works. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like when Obama got in office, so the whole narrative was, well, Obama is the president of the people. He has to do it for everybody, right? And so what we found out is that, everybody was catered to, you know what I'm saying, with the exception of Black folk, and how Black folk actually went into a decline in the Obama period. And is in
but the reason that I'm careful.
He had a Democrat Senate and House. He should have put in that work and passed that Affordable Health Care Act during that time instead of carrying it out.
He did. He did. That's what happened. Obamacare got passed in the first. Obamacare got passed,
but it took like a year and some change.
But that's because of But that is because. Let's take this back to the Affordable Care Act, right? The Obama, like Kamala.
And then on top of that, when it was passed, it wasn't even what it was at the end, even though white people love Obamacare now. They hate Obama. But go ahead.
Right, but it's not what it is because white folks pushed him back. The public option that we're talking about now.
The centrist Democrats. right?
Well, not even just centrist Democrats. You have to understand that centrist Democrats, absolutely, but let's also talk about the centrist Democrats that did get on board for it to actually pass. Because what we have to remember is that it only.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No.
I'm talking over you. I apologize. No, I shouldn't.
Oh, no problem, girl. This is how we talk. You're not offending me at all. So, but the gut or the big pullout was the public option. That was the big gut. Now, but let's take this a step further. That the public option was taken out, and it still was taken to the Supreme Court, and then the expansion of Medicare was revoked. So what I'm saying to you is that it was literally the starter, and everybody knew it was the starter, and even getting the starter over the finish line was extremely difficult. Did he use up unnecessary political capital doing so? We can now. That's a debate that we can go back and forth on. And I would say to you no. And the reason I would say to you no is that most of his political capital actually was spent with the bailout. So he was already working at a negative when we walked into healthcare. Healthcare was on his radar before we even got
to. That's a good point. No, I agree.
Before we even got. But I would also argue the same way with Bush. If to be obviously and fair, is that 9/11, even if they encouraged it, wanted it, whatever, still put him in a negative position because he had to deal with the issue in hand. And so I truly believe that, and I'm not saying that we would have gotten anything more black out of Obama as far as pro-black policy with your fist up. I'm not saying we would have gotten more of that. But what I am saying is that so much political capital was used up in that bailout that then decisions had to be made. And one of the biggest reasons I remember this distinctly is when he had what they call now the beer summit, when Henry Louis Gates, an esteemed professor at Harvard, was trying to get into his house, was locked out of his house, and the white folks around the neighborhood said he broke into his own house, and it was a whole ordeal. And when the white folk cops showed up, they tried to arrest him. It was just a whole foolishness. And Obama got on national television and said that the police acted stupidly. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. White folks went crazy.
They went crazy.
They got him to back his statement. They got him to walk his statement back because everybody kept saying, do you want any policy done? I mean, if you want policy, then you can't be making these type of inflammatory statements. Now, whatever decision he made, you can agree with or disagree with. But to me, I was like, oh, this is how serious it is for y'all that he made a statement and y'all mad. If we continue on, we could talk about Trayvon Martin. When he said Trayvon Martin could be his son. A voter in Iowa in the New York Times said that's when he lost her as a voter. Because he said that a black woman could be her son.
He was a two-term president. Hold on. Let's be honest. He was a two-term president. There was a lot more he could have done.
Oh, absolutely.
There was a lot more he could have done. If you look at the numbers in terms of, you're talking about him coming into office after the 2008 housing crisis and understanding that black people took the biggest hit, right? And
yes, and he shored up that industry. And by bailing out AIG, by bailing out, and this is the frustrating part about all of this. Go ahead.
You know what I'm saying? So he knows the economic vulnerability that black people were in. Now, as he was in office, the things that he did stuff, he did things for specific groups. He had the DACA Act, which is wonderful. The LGBT legislation that he did, which was definitely wonderful.
It wasn't legislation. It wasn't legislation. It was just an executive order. We overcharged that executive order. Well, what he did for LGBT, all he did was say that you don't have to hide it in the military. I mean, he only did that after the Supreme Court decided that it was okay for them to marry throughout the country. Like that was just a natural next reaction.
Tell me the executive order. So tell me the executive order that he did that specifically enfranchised black people.
But what executive order could he provide that was going to do that?
Tell me the executive order.
There is no executive order.
Exactly.
But not because.
Exactly.
But Kaya, not because he didn't want to. Because tell me which one would have done it.
That is a bullshit excuse that we have been giving Barack Obama over the years. I'm sorry. I'm not saying. So put it like this. I'm not saying that he did good, and I'm not saying that his presidency did not have high points. I'm not saying that. but I will criticize these specific parts, right? That when he came in, the expectation as a voter, as somebody who voted for him, was that he would, especially when people couldn't get housing, you know, on all these things because of the housing crisis, that there will be something that will create or in some way restore or repair, as we know.
And he did. So let me give you an example. Let me give you an example.
Criminal
you want to know?
Please don't say
No. You want to know policy? I can give you policy example after policy example. There was no executive order because there is no executive order that's going to then satisfy our issues. What did he do structurally? I'll give you the examples. One of the very first things that he did was he saved the auto industry. Why is that important? No. Why is that important?
I know what you're going to say, but I disagree.
No. This is huge.
Go ahead.
This is huge for Black wealth. Because without saving the Black auto industry, those pensions are gone. And who's going to be hurt more by those pensions than Black folks? When we talk about the rescaling and the retooling of the auto industry, he had them to, it was specifically written in that they kept a plant that was in a Black neighborhood that Black folks were there for. Did their pensions get cut? Yes, they got cut. But if they would have been allowed to file bankruptcy, then Black folks wouldn't have had any pension. They would have then been at the mercy then of Social Security if it was available. So that's one, if you want to talk about a policy. If you want to talk about another policy, let's talk about the credit. I can't give you the correct name. It's the Credit Act. And the Credit Act, what most people saw on the surface was it forces them to tell you how long it's going to make you to pay off the debt and all this other kind of stuff. But underneath, what people don't understand is that it stopped these big banks from coming to HBCUs and gutting Black students by letting them sign up for all these credit cards, and then they would leave college not only with student loan debt, but then also credit card debt at higher rates than any white student or at white colleges. So that's another thing. That's another policy that directly affected us. And if you look at the numbers of Black students with credit card debt, it's literally turned upside down after that act in 2009. If you look again, if you want another piece of policy, if you look then at the saving of Meharry as an HBCU, of Morehouse Medical School, and of Howard Hospital, all written inside of the Affordable Care Act, that they got specific provisions for cancer research that they were doing that saved their schools and in many ways saved Howard Hospital. If you want to go to, again, the justice system, if you want to talk about the Policing Act and how now the reason that we can go back and ask for and in many ways demand in the transcripts of a closed jury hearing is because of what happened in Ferguson during his time. The fact that he sent Eric Holder down there, that he got an actual report, and then the report has now then been the foundation for then how other police departments should work, or why their funding then should be cut. It is the literal foundation for the George Floyd bill that Karen Bass got passed in the House by every single Democrat, no matter their leaning. So when we talk about policy, did policy have a Black name on it? No. And if you ascribe to the theory of Julius Wilson, when he talks about when work disappears, that if you do that, if you call it a Black policy, it gets pushed and removed off the table before it can even get legs underneath it, because it's been called Black. So if we look at policy, there's several policy points, and I think I need to put a paper out about this, where he did move the needle.
Time out, Professor, because you've been going on and on. I need to respond to you about the auto industry and the HBCUs. First of all, the auto industry is a very hyper-local industry located in a specific region in the United States where all Black people don't live. HBCUs, even though HBCUs has a history of catering to Black people, most Black people don't have a college education. But it's not about that.
It's about the people that work at those HBCUs that are in the area. No, it's not just about the students that are at the school. It's not just about the students that work at the school.
That is an excellent point, but you were specifically talking about a program that talked about credit cards specifically targeting students.
Right, because I'm giving you an example, but if this is the point though. No. If you follow that thread, follow that thread. If the student, go ahead. You got to follow the thread. I can't get every single point inside of me giving exact policy example.
Say that something that talks about credit card companies targeting college students, in terms of taking out college, taking out credit cards during credit, how it impacts HBCUs. And I am telling you that most Black people don't even go to college. And now, as a result, added to that is that even though most Black people who have college education, if we look at the whole numbers of things, comes out of HBCUs, that's not the case now. HBCUs do not house most Black college students. However, on top of all of that, when a lot of Black people just don't go to college.
Right, but it's not just about the student that's going to college. It's about no. You wanted a specific policy, and that's why I'm showing you where the
it's not a
policy. No. Let me make this. Let me make this.
But let me.
I hear your point, but no. This is what I need to say.
Don't hear my point because I haven't finished my point.
No, I hear your point. This is what I need to say.
I have not finished my point.
Okay, you're talking about not all Black people go to college, but all Black people are affected by that credit card act. I gave you a specific part of the policy. The policy is huge. I gave you a specific part. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. That I'm giving you a specific part of that policy. That policy has affected all Black people. And if you go actually look at the credit card indebtedness after the 2009 act, we were the people that were most affected by the act. But it's not and this is my point to you as to, and the reason I want to scratch at this more, why I want to say this is that we look at policy at a finite point. But what we have to understand is that for Black people, that policy runs into every other area of our life. And what I mean by that is this. Just like you said that many Black students don't get a college degree, but the amount of Black students that are actually enrolling in college is extremely high. It's about who finishes. And so although you may not come out and get a degree, it doesn't mean that you haven't attended college. And it doesn't mean that at the community colleges, they weren't gunning for you and that they weren't coming to get you, or they were trying to get you to have loan debt. It doesn't mean that at the public institutions, they weren't gunning for you as far as Black people are concerned and getting you to get debt. And the reason that's as important is whether you get a degree or not, you are then affecting the entire community around you. What we know about HBCUs, especially small regional ones, is that they are then employing 30 to 40% of the people that live in the area. So if that HBCU closes down because that Black student has too much credit card debt, can't pay their, wait a minute. I'm showing you the thread of why it makes a difference. Because the person that works at that school, the school shuts down. We're talking about generations that are then going to be affected in places of the rural South who then don't have jobs for not just that person's generation, maybe for generations to come. And we've seen this with closures of HBCUs in Virginia that just happened. So it's the thread continues to pull. It's not, you asked for a specific policy objective and I gave it. And that's my point about executive orders. The way that our lives have been dismantled inside of this system, one executive order is not going to fix it or make us get celebrated about it. No executive order is going to do that. It's a structural change that has to happen.
All right. So let me say my point is what I was going to say is that if he really wanted to have something that is not Black, is to address student loan debt as opposed to credit card debt.
He did. I didn't even give you that point. He did. The reason I can buy a house right now is because of Obama. Obama took all of the student loan debt out. He took the banks out of the middleman. The bank is no longer the middleman. The federal government owns all of your debt. The reason that my loan is deferred right now with no interest is because of the move that he made. He took the banks out as the middleman. He has laid the foundation. No, but now he has laid the foundation for somebody to come behind him to then eradicate that debt or to get rid of it. You can't get rid of it if it doesn't belong to you. It now belongs solely to the United States government. Again, I'm not saying he was perfect. I'm not saying that he couldn't done more, but to deny what he did do is not fair either.
Oh, hold on for a minute. That wasn't even my point. But that wasn't even my point. But the problem that I do have is that I don't think that enough of us hold Barack Obama accountable for what he did not do, specifically
That's not true.
For the Black community. Now
you haven't been reading the books, girl.
You gotta let me say my point, sis.
There's been so many books. That's not true.
You have got to allow me. We on Zoom. So you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So you cannot tell me that there cannot be something allotted when he gives $38 billion to Israel, right? Or when there's a sanction to give $38 billion to Israel, which is a very specific group that comes from a very specific history and understands what's going on and cannot allot something for Black folk. Now, that is the voting power I think that we need to enact and think about in terms of how we move in our voting block. I think that we've got to be very critical in how we analyze Barack Obama. Like I said, I'm not taking away him and what he did, but we've got to be more critical. And I 100%, that's good. But until there is anything that specifically meets the needs of people that this country was built on, we still have issues, right? Right. And for him to say that, hey, you know what I mean? Even though he totally did the whole Black thing in his campaign, and then get on the other side of the presidency and say, hey, presidency, and say, I don't just represent Black people, which we knew already. And if you want me to do something, I remember seeing this, you've got to push me and make me. When there is totally an understanding, or there was an understanding that if we push you into office, we need help, man. And there isn't anything that's very clear, there's a problem. There is a problem when historically we know that a lot of groups got a lot of stuff. The whole immigration up until 1965, the Homestead Act, we're talking about helping European immigrants. So that's my thing.
So
right.
Let me know. I want to respond to this because I want to make sure we put this out there, because there's scholarship that pushes back on him. There's a whole lot of scholarship that pushes back on him and critiques him. So that's not true. There's lots of things that critique him. People are making their whole careers off of critiquing Obama. But there's two books that I very much enjoy. One by Michael Eric Dyson called The Black Presidency. And then the other by Melanie Price, Dr. Melanie Price, who's at Prairie View A&M, it's called The Race Whisperer, where she talks about what Obama does when it comes to race. So there's good scholarship out there. I would encourage people to look at it, but there have been Black folks in the community, or I should say in the academic community, have been very, very critical of Obama. And so to say that maybe the masses haven't, but us in academia.
This is the thing. Academia. Yeah. The problem is that you're talking academic speak. We're talking on the weekly check-in where people don't go and look at articles and scholarship. So that is part of the disconnect. I think that us as Black scholars, that we try, and you do that too, that we try to kind of close this gap, because the academy is a whole different world than we on the block, right?
No, absolutely, which is why I always like to drop books, not to say that folks are going to read them, but I also like to that's why I always like to drop books. They're both of those books and the one by Naomi Carter are under 200 pages. I mean, you could take you a month and stretch it out and read it. But that's why I try to, right? I want to push us to read again, right? And to read things written by Black people who have been vetted and who've been working in these spaces for years, right? There's Black scholars in communication that probably many people kind of have never even heard of, that very well, right? Based upon, and so when you hear certain things and people are like, oh, this is the new thing, and you're like, not really. A Black scholar said that like literally 10 years ago, right? And so that's our job, right? To me, I didn't get a PhD just to write stuff in an academic journal. I did it so that I could bring back to my people like, hey, let's look at this in different ways. And so with that being said, I think another reason why it's important to think about what this looks like for us for 40 years, and then at the 25-year mark when it comes to Trump, or the undoing of what he's done, is because of HR 40. So if you're talking about if you're talking about a piece of 40,
girl, that's a whole other 2 hours.
Right, but if you're talking about actual legislation that directly looks at the repair of Black people, then HR 40 is definitely something that should be considered, or that we should explore, that we should look at, because if you're saying you're looking for legislation, then there's legislation that is in the works that's in Congress.
Yeah, that's actually the only, and I must acknowledge #ADOS movement that has actually pushed that legislation that has been sitting and trying to be moved since 1989. And there's been other groups prior to. I credit to Impedum, and Cobra, and all these other groups, but it did not get the legs that it got was, I would say, let's start with Ta-Nehisi Coates' article that revisits reparations, and then like this conversation that happens. But we need more than HR 40 is a start, but it's just a bill to, what is it? Create proposals.
Correct, but proposals, but let me tell you why that's important, or why that is the framework or the foundation. Is because they say create proposals because there's already proposals that are in all of these committees. There are proposals that are in education. They're all so they're being covert by saying, oh, let's talk about proposals. Yeah, there's already pieces of legislation that y'all let die in committee. And now if I get a law that says that I get to present proposals, then that means all of those things have to now come to light that you carrying. So it's a strategic move. It's not the end all be all, but it's a strategic move to then structurally force them to bring those things to the table. And, I get the celebration of movements from the outside, but you gotta also have people on the that has been a dog with a bone as far as decentralizing power inside of that House of Representatives, so that HR 40 could get the traction, right? Because like you said,
right.
it's been talked about since the 80s, right? But it hasn't gotten traction for a number of reasons. A, because the pressure from the outside, that's always necessary in a political system, but also because they haven't had any level of control or power inside the House to force the issue, which they now do. So,
well, I know,
all
right.
great things.
So I have a question: Are all
this.
members of the House? Have all Black members of the House been sponsors of HR 40? Do you know? I have to look that up.
Yes.
They all have sponsored HR 40. Okay, cool.
Yes.
That's something that at least Maxine Waters, my congresswoman, has done. Okay, next.
Oh yeah, but it's not surprising. Right, but it's not surprising, right? Because it's not surprising because when we look at the CBC, that's the one place that they literally vote and a block and abstention. I mean, an absolutism, they vote in the block. When it comes to civil rights legislation, I mean, there's literally, there may be one or two at the most. But I think we're at 53 members now. When they're at 13, when they're at 22, when they were, in their entire progression, they always, when it comes to civil rights issues, we can argue about the details amongst ourselves or whatever. But when it comes to civil rights legislation, you're going to get a sponsorship out of all of them. And if you're not getting a sponsorship out of all of them, then they've had a meeting where they decided who's going to get the sponsorship for what reasons, etc. But that's one place that they've been pretty much in a block, and we don't got to worry about how they gonna vote.
Oh, we do have to worry about the Congressional Black Caucus. I have a serious critique on.
Oh no, we have to worry about them, but not how they're gonna vote on. We have to worry about them in total, but not how they're gonna vote on civil rights.
Okay, but we got to keep that. I think it's important that I think one of the failures of the Black vote in general has been we have not kept that pressure. I think if we would have kept more pressure, I think the move would have been maybe.
I don't think it's about the pressure. I think it's about the miseducation. I don't think it's about pressure. I think the people that are educated enough have kept pressure. The
people who are educated enough are often these people who roll in these circles. Not
formal education. No. I'm not talking about formal education. I'm not talking about a degree. Okay. I'm talking about people who are educated about the system and how it works. You just mentioned ADOS, right? They understand how the system works. I don't necessarily agree with all of their views, but they understand how the system works. So what I mean by education is I'm not talking about a degree. I'm talking about understanding civics. Right? There are many of us in the Black community that do not understand civics. And if you look at this, right, if you look at the drop off in pushing Congressional Black Caucus members, if you look at when they were first started in 1971, and you look at the original 13, you see all of these Black organizations, whether they be Black militant organizations or however you want to categorize them, all making demands of the Congressional Black Caucus. But they were making demands because they understood civics. We have a lack of understanding, so there's not that many groups that are pushing them.
But the reality is that those who have been in the front are people who have education. If we look at it, even though there are definitely street folk and folks from grassroots, these people are educated. You know what I mean? So, that's something that we have to, we just have to acknowledge. Even if we talk about Black Panther Party, Huey P. Newton's dissertation, is online, right? And I think that is part of maybe our experiences is that we expect those who have education to be the ones at the forefront talking. One of the people who didn't, quote unquote, have that education is a Fannie Lou Hamer, which is a rarity when we talk about the historical Black political power leaders. You know what I mean? And I think it is because of her quote unquote lack of education is that she's not studied or celebrated enough in this whole political process. But let's move on. We're gonna do one more. We're gonna do one more. I love this. I love this. I love this.
This has been great. I just want to let you know, sis, this has been great.
Oh yeah, look, I'm gonna tell you, I love this. I believe in the shine. I believe we all win. I believe that it's important that we challenge each other, you know, and you have given me a lot to think about. I actually wrote the books down, you know, to go read and everything like that. And I think that's important. Child, ego has jumped off the building. It's all hands on deck.
Both of us, right? With both of us, it ain't no ego. You see, I'm sitting on the couch. We just talking.
Yes. Okay, so there were multiple things that I talked about. We would talk about. Take the pick. What you want to dive into before we leave? There were so many things we talked about, and we could pick this up. Whatever we don't talk about on the next conversation. Yeah,
I think the thing that I want to leave with, I think it's important is this piece about civics. I don't care. I don't care about, you know, who you voting for. I mean, I'd have some problems with you if you Black and you talking about you voting for Donald Trump. I would like to have a conversation with you. However, if that's who you choose, then go ahead, go for it, right? I would like to have a conversation. But my thing is, it's too many of us disillusioned inside with the process. And my thing is that you're giving, and this is how I see it, you're giving them what they want. They want you to be disillusioned. Right. They want you not to be engaged. They want you not to have the conversations that you and I are having right now, right? And so for me, that's where I really want to leave it, is this understanding that we got to make a decision about our participation is not negotiable. What's negotiable is who I'm going to vote for. What's negotiable is, you know, who I'm going to represent or who I'm not going to represent, who I'm going to push or who I'm not going to push. You know, what's the strategy, right? Am I going to be the person protesting on the street, or am I going to hold Black folks accountable who are in the front as educated people? Or am I going to hold them accountable to make sure that they don't forget their way when they get to the front? All of these things. But those are the things that we should be debating about, not about if we're going to participate. And the reason that I feel like that is, to me, the biggest slap in the face is because literally Black people have died, have put there are many Fannie Lou Hamers that we know nothing about who walked into clerks' offices and risked their lives by trying to register to vote. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's not about who you choose. It's about your decision not to participate in a system that literally was built off of your ancestors' back. And they were ignorant enough, or arrogant, I should say, enough to then have the audacity to say all men are created equal. So that as soon as we get an opportunity to say that you did not consider me, that now the entire world right now is on pins and needles trying to figure out who the United States is going to choose as the next president. And what I guess I would say to anybody that's watching, regardless of your color or your race, is that the amount of power that you have right now is literally the world's anticipation. So when you're really thinking about, you're thinking about not voting, I need you to understand that there are thousands of people in the world that would trade spots with you right now based upon the apprehension that they are feeling, regardless of their color, regardless of their social station, that they're feeling throughout the world, while you have the luxury of deciding if you are going to or not.
Right. I think you had some really good points that I have to agree with. The world is definitely watching, and they are on pins and needles, because however this whole election sways, and let me be very clear, it's not just the presidential election. There are multiple elections that determine how the United States will move forward. So understand that it's a whole bunch of ways that you can activate your political voice. But that is very true. The conversations that I've been having with people in Italy right now are like, what is going on in the United States? We are nervous. And I don't think, I didn't understand how much power that we had until I left. I mean, I've traveled, some parts of the world, and I've heard things, but the power that we have. So activate your political voice. Please to me, in my opinion, voting is just a minutia of
Just
what
a
it is
start.
that you can do. And it's just a start of activating your political voice, but you must activate it, whatever that looks like. And also have these difficult conversations, because we cannot operate in fear anymore. We can't operate in this respectability politics anymore. We have got to literally walk through the fire, you know, and not be, and walk through the fire and know that we will not burn if we walk
Right.
with our truth, you know what I'm saying? And we walk with the purpose of the commitment that on the other side, it will be whatever it looks like. And this is a marathon, as the great Nipsey Hussle says.
Right.
This is not just this moment. There's
Right.
going to be, that's another thing, is that people are placing kind of like, you got to do it now. No. This has been going on. It's going to go on after this, but just know that it's a marathon. We're walking with you. And even if we are at the opposite sides of something, we'll still walk. Just like my, you know what I'm saying, like my sister, Dr. Sherice Janaye Neslon, who I appreciate coming on with me because I know you got a huge teacher load. I am going to leave the final comments to you, sis, and we're going to get up out of here. And I'll see you soon.
Well, my last thoughts are this. Keep having conversations. Keep having conversations, no matter how difficult they are. Keep having conversations because it makes all of us understand each other better. Mm-hmm. And the key right now is to make us feel like each other is the enemy. And that is how power is consolidated, is when you make someone else the enemy. And the only way that you don't make someone the enemy is you talk to them. Regardless of how difficult it is. And so that's what I encourage people to do in this moment. Continue talking to one another, have the difficult conversations, and don't think yourself lucky to be in a place where you get to decide the future of a country. Be grateful and do something about it.
I appreciate you, sis, and excuse me. I appreciate you 100%. And like we were saying before you jumped on air, iron sharpens iron.
Yes.
I am honored to be intellectually sparring with you. I learned from you. I've grown from this, and we're going to do this again very soon.
Okay, sis.
Okay, you are listening to the weekly check-in, the dopeness known as Dr. I gotta do it like that, Dr. Sherice Janaye Neslon. I am Kaya Shivers. We about this piece.
If you wanna see good news, you don't see on regular TV. From another perspective, something relative to your needs. And we